As a leader, one of your responsibilities is to set the strategic direction for the whole organisation to align to. And you probably wouldn't delegate that, would you? But beware, if you delegate the design of the KPIs for that strategic direction, that strategy won't be executable. And here's why. It's not uncommon in larger organisations particularly for the senior leaders to write the strategic goals and then delegate the design of the KPIs for those goals to maybe the strategy and performance team or the next layer down managers. And the result is a lot of wasted time for a set of KPIs no one wants to own. Of all the delegated KPI teams that I've seen put in that position, more than 90% of them simply cannot do it. They cannot produce the ideal set of KPIs for their leaders' goals. There are just too many things they have to guess at, like, what does this goal really mean? Or is this goal meant to be an action? What impact were the leaders really intending by this? Which parts of this strategic direction do the leaders want measured? Is it just the goals? Is it the strategic themes? Do they want the actions measured, the initiatives as well? They also have to guess at which KPIs would the leaders find most convincing as evidence for each goal. They're guessing at how much investment the leaders are prepared to put into the data for any new measures. They even have to guess which leader would be in the best position to own which measure. They cannot avoid making these guesses, and that's for three significant reasons. The first reason is that usually the delegated KPI team just weren't part of the strategy design process or the goal design conversations. They don't always know the context of the goals that the leadership team chose, and usually when we have the wrong context, we unavoidably end up with the wrong measures. For example, build the capability of our people. That sounds quite familiar. Most organisations have a strategic goal like that. But in a packaging and logistics company that's failed to attract and develop its workforce to meet even the basic role requirements, the context of such a goal is very different compared to, say, a defence agency that must prepare its workforce to meet a new era of national security threats. Without the whole delegated KPI team having this context, weasel words can't be de-weaseled and multi-focus goals can't be further prioritised. It's not enough for one or two people in the team either to have the context, because that means everyone else still only has second-hand interpretations. The second reason is that leaders probably are quite used to weasel words and use them to write their goals. Weasel words mean different things to different people in different contexts. Weaselly goals have more than one meaning, and the specifically intended meaning, well, that's hidden from everyone who is not part of the conversation that chose it. And it's even true that those who chose it can later forget what they really meant by it too. I have seen that happen. So capability is a weasel word. Its definition is the ability or power to do something, but in business, it's used to mean any or all of the right people with the right skills in the right place with the right resources doing the right things in the right way at the right time. And no one is going to measure every possible dimension of that definition of capability. Each organisation will have a nuanced version of capability that's meaningful to that organisation, and that nuance needs to be deliberately clear. If the delegated KPI team don't de-weasel a goal accurately, they end up arriving at the complete wrong thing to measure, and often they don't have the opportunity to even ask the leaders what the weasel words meant, or they're too embarrassed to for fear of seeming stupid or ignorant. The third reason is that leaders will still challenge whatever others will come up with. If leaders aren't part of the KPI design conversations, they can't understand how and why decisions are made about the measures. It'll just be too easy for the leaders to believe it was a trivial process to arrive at them, so they equally as trivially criticise them. But measure design is never a trivial process. When it's done without a good method, it goes around in circles. But when it's done with a good method, it requires deliberate decisions along the way. But despite that, the leaders don't appreciate the process that the delegated team went through, They don't hear the struggle to understand and translate the goal. They don't witness the depth and breadth of the exploration of potential KPIs. They don't understand the rationale for rejecting or accepting each potential KPI. So just as the delegated KPI team don't understand the context and specific meaning of the strategic goals, their leaders won't understand the context for how the KPIs were arrived at. The ideal, of course, is to encourage the leadership team to own the responsibility of designing their own KPIs. Not every leadership team has the right culture yet, however. So if this is impossible in your situation, no matter how hard you try to convince them not to delegate their KPI design, there are a few workarounds. Now, workaround number 1 is to include the delegated KPI team in at least some of the strategy design sessions, kind of as flies on the wall. This way, they'll have more understanding of the context and meaning of those goals. Workaround number 2 is for leaders to make themselves available to the delegated KPI team throughout the KPI design process to answer questions and provide more detail about the meaning of the goals and their intended impacts. And then workaround number 3, well, that's for leaders to write clearer goals and more of a description for each goal to make them easier for other people to understand. Now, this should happen anyway, when you think about it. If the delegated KPI team can't understand a goal, then how could the rest of the organisation possibly understand it? Never forget, though, that the true owners of the strategic KPIs are the members of the senior leadership team. Those strategic KPIs are vitally important to guide the leadership team's decisions about strategy execution and strategy achievement. It's the leadership team that will use those strategic KPIs, and they won't do it without ownership of them. Imagine you need a tailor-made suit for an important event. You're not going to send your staff to the tailor on your behalf. And in the same way, if you own the goals, you really own the measures. The only measures you will feel you can own are the measures that you are involved in creating yourself. So the only true solution is this: leaders design their own strategic KPIs. The only way I've ever seen KPIs come to life and create real performance improvement is when the owners of those KPIs were the same people who designed them. Our organisations need evidence-based leaders who are deeply committed to their strategic goals, who have crystal clear visions of how those goals will become manifest in the real world, and who can easily help others see that vision just as clearly, and who routinely monitor those goals and prove it as they become reality. These are the leaders that, with PuMP, we can help. Only the leaders know what the true evidence for their strategic goals can be. They are accountable for using that evidence to reach the strategic goals, and often accountable to a board. Leaders cannot delegate that level of accountability. Now, if you have any stories or examples to share about leaders delegating the design of strategic KPIs, or want to ask a question, I'd love to hear from you in the comments.